So in this video, I'm going to talk a lot about this Native American theme that I've been noticing. I'm also going to talk about how it's connected to my life. I hate doing this. I'm not trying to do this. It's just that I've noticed these things, and they seem to be connected at least to the area where I live. And there's also things that are just connected just to my life in general. It's just kind of weird. So anyway, the other night, in my last video, I guess, the other night I had this dream about somebody leaving me a comment about salt, thunder, and lightning, and it was a clue to look up Salt Lake City. And then I looked up Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City just so happened to equal 138. The first article that I even look at on CNN is about Miss Missouri being the first gay contestant. Miss Missouri equals 183, not necessarily 138, but 183, a number I've mentioned a whole lot in regards to Pope Francis and Queen Elizabeth. But Queen Elizabeth's real name equals 138, Donald Trump 138, Brexit happened 138 days before the United States presidential election. Like I said, Salt Lake City 138, beauty pageant. I've even talked about how Sioux Falls was connected to me. All kinds of other stuff. Quaker State, Pennsylvania, which I'll mention here in a little bit. It all ties back into this Native American theme. Andrew Jackson, he was just in the news, or I guess not him personally, but Steve King was talking about him not being on the $20 bill, and he wants him to still be on it and not Harriet Tubman. Steve King, of course, the representative in the area where I live. He even went to Denison High School, Denison Monarchs. He's Steve King. A lot of it, and that's also where Brandon Scherf played football. Brandon Scherf, a former Iowa Hawkeye, now plays for the Washington Redskins, right? The Native American theme. And when I really started noticing a lot of this, it was when this boy died from Elkhorn, the boy who died in Orlando, Florida, that got ate by the alligator. He just so happens to live about an hour away from where I live. I noticed a whole bunch of stuff. It was Lake Buena Vista, Florida. I graduated from Buena Vista University in Storm Lake, Iowa. I talked about my town being the halfway point between Buena Vista and Elkhorn. It was all connected to the royal theme as well. I even talked about Zachary Taylor, the 12th president, who got famed for the Battle of the Buena Vista. His name equals 65, like Prince. He's the only president to die at the age of 65. The last time anybody got ate by an alligator in the United States was a guy named Zachary Taylor, and he got ate on 6'5". Anyway, I talked about a whole bunch of stuff. I even talked about the death of Chief Yellow Smoke, because this is one of the main things out of the town that I live in. I mean, it's a town of 1,200 people. Nothing super special about it, except for when a long time ago, I was looking up the history of it just because I was interested. And I found out that Chief Yellow Smoke got murdered here. And then the Indians the Omaha Indians that he was a part of, he was the last keeper of the sacred pole. They were going to come to town and kill everybody. But the Freemasons dressed up in their Freemason outfits or whatever, and they went out and did hand signals, and the Indians knew the hand signals and believed what they said and didn't kill the whole town. And this guy got killed in 1868. The town I live in equals 68. The kid who got ate by an alligator equals 68. I mean, there's a ton more to it. I'll leave a link to a playlist that I'm going to make with this, and I'll put it in the description. But there's a ton of other stuff that I talked about in these videos here and then this post. But more of the story. So the kid who got ate by an alligator, literally, alligator equals 41 and 95. This kid, his name, the small way equals 41 even. And it was at Orlando, like Disney World and whatnot. Captain Hook was also scared of the alligators and whatnot. Peter Pan equals 41.95, just like alligator, just like Neverland. There's been a whole lot of stuff in regards to missing airplanes that connects to a lot of things, just like the Amtrak derailments. Also, I put in Halloween. No idea why. Just, I think because LeBron James dressed as Prince for Halloween, and just Halloween in general, just, you know, just reminds me of, like, evil spirits and whatnot. So, and I also talked about the town Erling, Iowa, that I live 13 miles from, and I used to drive through to work. That was the place that a real exorcism happened that the movie and the book are actually based partially off of. And the 88th anniversary will be this year in August. And I mentioned a whole lot about 88 in regards to satanic rituals. Anyway, the town that I live in, and also that town where the exorcism took place, just so happens to be located on 41 degrees north, 95 degrees west. My name in Gematria even equals 95. And there's more to it, but I just wanted to do a quick recap of like where I first had noticed this Native American type theme. And I keep seeing it. It even connects to the death of Alton Sterling and also, what's the other guy's name from Minnesota? The Minnesota guy. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Philando Castile or whatever, it even sounds like Orlando kind of. Anyway, as I looked back, I made a whole bunch of videos on college football last year. I talked a lot about the Iowa Hawkeyes and also the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and even some to do with Michigan Wolverines. But in regards to the Iowa Hawkeyes, there was a whole bunch of stuff that I had mentioned in regards to Council Bluffs, Iowa, or maybe it might have been the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I can't even remember. I didn't go back and look. One of them two teams I made videos on in regards to Geronimo. It was Geronimo, and I talked about the Skull and Bones, how they supposedly stole his skull and bones and whatnot in Oklahoma. And it also connected to Council Bluffs, Iowa, which was basically the starting point of the Mormon trail when they went off to Salt Lake City and whatnot. The town used to be called Canesville, that equals 38, founded by named after this guy, Thomas L. Kane, 38. Omaha equals 38. Omaha and Council Bluffs are basically the same town to me. They're right across the river from each other. I mean, this is tons of meth, a little bit nicer, but other than that, they're basically the same place. Elkhorn, like I said, is western Omaha. Elkhorn even equals 38. Prince equals 38. I talked about Lil Wayne emergency landing in Omaha, just like Prince had to emergency land a plane as well before he died. Lil Wayne equals 38. Lil Wayne is even from Louisiana, and there's a huge Louisiana connection. If you go way back, I talked about how Obama came to Omaha right after his State of the Union, his final State of the Union. The next day he went to Omaha and gave a speech, and the day after that he went to Baton Rouge and gave a speech. But anyway, I went back and looked at some of the old stuff that I had made in regards to the Mormons and just trying to piece it all together. I know there's something to do with the Native Americans and also the area that I live. So I looked back up the Omaha Indians, and it just so happens their second to last head chief was named Big Elk. And he is the one who signed an illegal treaty that brought the Mormons to settle where Council Bluffs, Iowa is. And the reason that he did that was because of the Sioux tribe. They kept having quarrels or whatever with the Sioux tribe, and the Omaha Indians were not well equipped, so they thought if they brought in the Mormons, they would help protect them or whatever. So that's why this guy signed this illegal treaty. But that's how the Mormons made it to Council Bluffs, the famous stopping point before the Mormon Trail. But as I was thinking about it, his name was Big Elk. And then we just had the kid from Elkhorn get ate by the alligator. And I just thought, pretty interesting, I guess. So, anyway, this guy, when he died, his adoptive son became the last head chief and one of 7 chiefs to travel to Washington, D.C. for negotiations. And this led them to lose a whole lot of their land. Yellow Smoke also was one of them 7. So anyway, the last head chief just so happened to be Joseph LaFlèche. And he was adopted, so he was like part white even. So it just makes me wonder, he is probably a Freemason, probably, along the lines of how they learned the Masonic symbols before they, when my town killed Yellow Smoke or whatever. Who knows though, just throwing that out there. Maybe the Omaha Indians actually knew Masonic stuff way before that, And I mean, when you think about how Mormonism connects even more into, the Native Americans, Mormons believe that there was ancient prophets who lived in America before the time of Jesus and whatnot, clear back to I think 2200 BC all the way to 421 AD, which is interesting, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But, just in general, think about it. Think about the Native Americans and think about the Mormon beliefs. Anyway, on the trip of the 7 chiefs here, with Joseph LaFlèche and Yellow Smoke, when they went to Washington, D.C., ended up losing a lot of their land because of it. The guy who went along with them, and many people thought that he was a chief, but he actually wasn't. They even called him half-breed and whatnot because he was white and he wasn't adopted and whatnot. But, moral of the story, this guy went and he was the translator for them. And he seemed to play a big part in a lot of things. There was even stuff with the Elkhorn River. There was a lot of trade going through the Elkhorn River and stuff. But just wanted to point this guy out for the fact that his name means white horse. And he also died on the 197th day of the year. I talked about Prince equals 197. I talked about how the Republican National Convention just so happens to be the second day will be on July 19th, 19/7. If you write out Charles, it equals 207. If you write out 207, it equals 197. There's a whole bunch of this stuff connected to the royal theme. There's also been a whole lot of white horse or just horse symbolism in general. I talked about a cavalier, like the Cleveland Cavaliers, being followers of King Charles I and II during the English Civil War. But a cavalier is also just a horse. You had the Broncos win the Super Bowl. They were the white horse. You had the Invictus Games in Orlando. That's where Lane Graves was killed by the alligator as well. Invicta is a white horse. You have O.J. Simpson all over the news. O.J. got away on the white Bronco. Of course, O.J. Simpson also famous for being a Buffalo Bill, which also ties into the Native American theme. I even talked about the movie Minions, and, that it even ties back into what I talked about in the last video with the Miss Missouri, but Miss Congeniality, Sandra Bullock, who's also lives in New Orleans, but she was Scarlet Overkill, who was trying to steal Queen Elizabeth's crown. Also Miss Congeniality. Then Bob in that movie, when he pulls the sword from the stone, he's sitting on the white rocking horse. You have the white horse of Revelation. Tons of stuff with it. So just interesting, this guy's name is White Horse. So anyway, just a little bit of history on the Omaha Indians that I had discovered. In this blog, I talk about the South Park episode. I even made a video on that, it was before I even knew Gematria. I just saw a lot of patterns with the number 8 in this episode, but there's a South Park episode called Go Fund Me. It's where they're making fun of the Washington Redskins for not changing their racist name. And it reminds me a lot of the Cleveland Indians. They kind of went through the same thing and whatnot. Neither one of them have changed their name. Anyway, that South Park episode came out in 2014. 14 seemed to be a big number around the Cleveland Indians. They just went on the 14-game winning streak. What's interesting about that is that they used to be called the Cleveland Naps, and they were named after a guy who coached and played for them, Nap LaJoy, who left the team in 1914. Naps even equals 14. They were called the Naps 14. This guy left in 14. They won a 14-game win streak. After 2014 is when they changed their name to the Indians. If you write out 14, it equals 41. They got their 14th win in a game that went 19 innings. 19 equals 41. Cleveland even located on 41 degrees north, just like the area that I live in. Also interesting, the Omaha Indians literally used to be called the Maha Indians, and they were originally from the Ohio area, so around Cleveland and whatnot. Nap LaJoy, his real name is Napoleon LaJoy. I mean, come on. I talked about Napoleon as well in regards to France and New Orleans and Louisiana. Napoleon equals 38, Bonaparte equals 38, Louisiana equals 38, Minnesota equals 38, Prince equals 38. Anyway, it also says this guy is known as Larry LaJoy or the Frenchman, so obviously, but Larry LaJoy equals 126 and 54 gematria, just like New Orleans. Now, isn't it kind of funny that literally the Cleveland Indians go on a 14-game winning streak? They sweep Detroit, they sweep Atlanta, then they go 2-2 against Toronto, and they even lost 17-1 on the second game they lost to Toronto. English Civil War equals 171. But I mean, that's like exactly what happened in the NBA Finals when Cleveland, they swept the Pistons, then they swept the Hawks. Then they went 2-2 against Toronto, Such a joke. Anyway, Blue Jays equals 95. This guy, born on 9/5. Like I said, my name equals 95. The area that I live in is even on 95 degrees west. The guy who got rid of the sacred pole for the Omaha Indians, actually, let's look him up really quick. Francis LaFlèche. He even died on 9/5 at the age of 74, like Masonic and whatnot, But 9/5, even the day that William McKinley, the third assassinated president, gave his final speech before he died or whatever, on 9/5, which I promise eventually I'll get to. I really, really feel like a lot of this stuff is just foreshadowing an upcoming political assassination, and whether it's Obama, Trump, possibly Hillary Clinton, who really knows, but maybe the Pope. There's just something, they keep foreshadowing all of these assassinated presidents. They've been coding a lot of them all together. So, like I said, I'll get to that eventually. I even talked about the Miss Gay America, Miss Missouri. The article says 95 years, even though it was only 94, 9 months, 23 days. I also wrote in here that this guy played second base, which was just a big topic in the College World Series. They talked about Jerry Kendall, who his Minnesota team beat Arizona in 1956 in the College World Series. He hit for the cycle in that College World Series, but it was Arizona lost, and then he later went on to coach Arizona, and he coached Arizona to their first 3 College World Series championships. But that guy was second base, and in Game 3 of the College World Series, it was Arizona's second baseman who messed up and pretty much cost them the game. The second baseman for Coastal Carolina almost hit for the cycle as well. That's why they brought it up. But second base equals 87. In the previous video, I talked a lot about 87 and how it connects to the number 219 and August 7th and Queen Elizabeth and whatnot. 87 is 183 days after her 64th anniversary of being queen and 183 days before her 65th anniversary of being queen. Clinton in gematria also equals 87. But let's move on here. So the Book of Mormon, it says that it was from ancient prophets who lived on the American continent from approximately 2200 BC to 421 AD. Just an interesting number. Prince, the singer, died on 421, which just so happened to be Queen Elizabeth's 90th birthday. Rome was founded by Romulus and Remus on 421, supposedly. They don't know the actual year, they just know that it was April 21st for sure. But it does say that This guy, Timaeus, was the first Roman scholar, said it was 38 years before the first Olympiad. So the Olympiad is the 4-year period between the Olympics and whatnot. So just kind of interesting, we got the Olympics coming up in August this year. 8/7, a day I keep talking about. I've also mentioned 8/12 a whole lot. Lots of significant days in August, believe it or not. But, you know, the Olympics just so happens to fall on some of these days. Also interesting in Gematria, Latter-day Saints equals 188. The 87 is super connected to the Philadelphia train wreck last year on May 12th of 2015. It was even 87 days before 8/7. And then 219 days before Pope Francis's birthday, 8/7, the 219th day. This 8/7 also 219 days before Pope Francis's 3rd-year anniversary being the Pope. But, so train 188, Latter-day Saints equals 188. Joseph Smith wasn't allowed to take the tablets until 922, which was also 188 years ago. I also find it interesting in regards to the black dudes getting shot. July 6th is when they reported it all. You know, Alton Sterling got shot on 7/5, but they didn't report it until 7/6. And then later that night, last night, they were reporting about the other one in Minnesota. July 6th just so happens to be the 188th day of the year this year. You know, also the mirror day of July 6th just so happens to be June 26th, so normally the 187th day with 178 days left. June 26th is the exact opposite. 188 days left. It's the 177th day. This day is super important, you know. That was the day that gay marriage was legalized. That was the day that Obama sang Amazing Grace at Clementa Pinckney's funeral. 9 days after 9 people were shot. You know, 9 months, 9 days later was 4/4. The first president to die in office died on 4/4. If Obama dies in office, he'll be the 9th president to do so. 9 presidents after JFK. Abe Lincoln died 9 hours and 9 minutes after being shot. 9/9 of last year was even the day that Queen Elizabeth II surpassed Queen Victoria for longest reigning British English monarch of all time. And if you watch the videos that I'm going to leave in the link, I know there's a lot to it, but I talk about 262 a whole bunch and 626 and how it's connected to the date of September 19th. That's the day that Pope Francis went to Cuba. The 262nd day of the year, Obama went to Cuba 26 weeks, 2 days later. 262 days after Pope Francis was in Cuba, Hillary Clinton clinched the nomination. Clinton in Jewish Gematria equals 262. This day also just so happens to be the halfway point between 329 and 923, both significant numbers I've talked about, you know, in regards to 88 and all kinds of stuff. Pope Francis's visit to the United States, tons of stuff with it. So anyway, I want to move on here to the death of former Iowa Hawkeye and former Buffalo Bill, Kyle Calloway, who just died on July 2nd, but they didn't report it until July 5th. And I'll show you why they did that as well. But anyway, his name in Gematria, 46, 55, 145, Iowa Hawkeyes, 55, 145. His last name, Calloway, equals 29, Iowa, the 29th state. Herbert Hoover is the only president from Iowa. He became the president in 1929. He was even from a family of Quakers. Quakers equals 29. You know, once again, connecting to the Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia stuff. Even literally, the Mormon religion began in around Pennsylvania. Or I guess Joseph Smith moved to Pennsylvania after he had got the golden plates or whatever. So, anyway. A ton of other, 29 connections to Iowa and whatnot, but interesting, this guy dies at the age of 29. A former Iowa Hawkeye dies at the age of 29. Last name equals 29, the 29th state. I also, like I said, I've mentioned Brandon Scherf, another former Iowa lineman, and how he plays for the Redskins. He even wears number 68, right? The same year that the town I live in killed Yellow Smoke, the town that I live in equals 68. What I find really strange, though, is that he died in Vail, Arizona. So it's just outside of Tucson. You know, I just made a whole bunch of videos in regards to stuff connecting to the Native American theme and some other stuff in regards to the College World Series where Arizona, who's from Tucson, lost. And I mean, this guy was jogging down a railroad track and he got ran over by a train. I mean, even if you had headphones on, I just can't imagine how that could really happen. How you could be jogging down a train track and get ran over by a train. Who knows? I mean, I'm not saying that it's not possible, just doesn't seem very possible. But it's also interesting in regards to Arizona and Tucson, because in the College World Series I talked about the gay theme that they're doing as well, and there was a train wreck that just so happened to be in Trinidad, Colorado. A van crashed into the Amtrak. Trinidad, Colorado used to be the sex change capital of the world, and all kinds of other stuff. A 4-year-old even survived. Yesterday we had the story of, or that video on Facebook about the 4-year-old that got kidnapped and whatnot. Then the Minnesota guy, keep forgetting his name, Philando or whatever, there was the 4-year-old sitting in the back. Anyway, what really gets me, Vail has a pretty big connection to my life. So he dies in Vail, Arizona. I decided to look up Vail. On Wikipedia, it only shows these places for Vail. Vail, Colorado, Arizona, Iowa, Salt Lick, Kentucky used to be known as Vail, Vail, Michigan, and then this Vail Township. So just interesting. There's not very many of them. One of them just so happens to be, literally, I live right here. This is Vail, Iowa. This is Denison, Iowa, where Brandon Scherf is from, where Steve King graduated from high school at the Monarchs and whatnot. Interesting, it's 26.2 miles. That's what Google Maps says. The fastest route is. I just mentioned the 262 stuff. But what really sticks out to me about this place, being Vail, is that literally Yellow Smoke Campground is right here in Denison, Iowa. The next closest town is Vail. So, you know, you look at it and you go, well, who knows, you know? I mean, I'm the same way, but it's just interesting that Vail, Iowa is the next closest town to this Yellow Smoke Campground that I've mentioned. And I mentioned how the town I live in was famous for killing Yellow Smoke. Anyway, I know there's more as I scroll down here. Just going to talk about this stuff here that I have written. So the 29th prime number is even 109, like Omaha, Nebraska. Arizona is the 48th state. If you write out Iowa, Iowa equals 48. Vail, Arizona in gematria equals 128. The day he died, July 2nd, also equals 128. Just reminded me a lot of a video I made a while back about the date of August 12th. But William Penn equals 128. Pennsylvania became a state on a date numerology of 128. Denison, Iowa, where Yellow Smoke Park is, where Brandon Scherf and whatnot. Denison, Iowa equals 128. What's even weirder is that when you look at the list here, the main one that comes up is Vail, Colorado. I used to go skiing here every year that we went skiing except for 1 year. 1 year I went to Steamboat, Colorado when I was like 22 or 3 or something like that. Every other year we went to Keystone, a Keystone resort that's owned by Vail or whatever. What's just really interesting, you know, Pennsylvania is also the Keystone state. It's the Keystone and the Quaker state. So, I mean, oh, the odds, you know. Every time I went to Vail, Colorado, or it's actually Dillon, Colorado, we always went skiing at Keystone that's owned by Vail, you know. Also interesting, my mom is one of 9 kids, and the first sibling that she had that died, he died on my brother's 25th birthday, and he was from Vail, Iowa. My brother's name equals 68. The town I live in equals 68. Famous for killing Yellow Smoke in 68. Brandon Scherf wore number 68. If you add up Brandon Scherf's jersey and Calloway's jersey, it even adds up to 128. Once again, the Pennsylvania connection. You know, even weirder, my brother married a girl from Underwood, Iowa that equals 68, and now he lives just outside of Council Bluffs. I mean, there's Underwood and then Council Bluffs. We're kind of like really close to Underwood. So just interesting, I guess, that he married a girl from Underwood, Iowa. Also interesting, my mom's sibling, my mom's first sibling to die, the guy from Vale, he was the 6th of 9, and my mom is the 8th of 9. You know, the 6 and the 8. Just interesting. Who knows, but. Also interesting that I'm talking about this right now. I haven't seen my brother in a long time, and I'm going to his son's birthday party, second birthday party, in 2 days or whatever, on Saturday. It's pretty bad. I honestly don't know if that's even his real birthday, so I don't want to ask, so hopefully I'll find out. And the reason I want to ask is because if that is his real birthday, then his name gematria matches up with the date or whatever, so. But anyway, the only other sibling that my mom has that had died, he died on the same day as the Philadelphia train wreck. I mean, it's just, what are the odds of that? You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just really weird to me. So anyway, this Kyle Calloway, he wore number 60 at Iowa. The Iowa Hawkeyes' first game of the season is 9-3 against Miami, Ohio this year. So they don't report his death until July 5th, and this is why, right here. It's 60 days before Iowa Hawkeyes' first game. And I didn't put much thought into it, but, you know, last year they had the death of Tyler Sash, the former Iowa Hawkeye player who played for the New York Giants in the Super Bowl. He died on September 8th last year. I talked about his death and how it was connected to Iowa having a good season. They just so happened to have an awesome season. They even compared it to the 1985 season, which interested, you know, the Royals didn't win since 1985. All kinds of 85 stuff. The Super Bowl connected to the 85 Bears. Villanova won this year, hadn't won since 85. 85, the day that Back to the Future, or the year that Back to the Future ends and begins and whatnot. Anyway, Tyler Sash equals 55, just like Kyle Calloway, just like Iowa Hawkeyes, you know? What are the odds of that? These people dying, they play for a team that has the same numerology as their name, or gematria as their name. These two guys even played on the same Iowa Hawkeye team. Tyler Sash played an extra year. He played until, I believe, 2011. Kyle Calloway drafted in the 2010 draft, but I mean, he was born on June 21st, 21/6. He was the 216th pick. We've also talked about, you know, 6 times 6 times 6 equals 216. Interesting, you know, I looked at the Iowa Hawkeyes who all got drafted that year. None of them got drafted to a team that was connected to a Native American theme, except for this other guy who got drafted to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I mean, look at that. He's born on 6/8, his name in gematria, 128. So anyway, the same day that we got the death of Kyle Calloway, we got an article about RG3 being set up for failure with the Cleveland Browns. Once again, a Cleveland story, but what this reminded me a whole lot of was the South Park episode that I had mentioned in these previous posts. You know, because he was a Washington Redskin. In that South Park episode, though, he was injured, and they had a Kirk Cousins who wore number 8 and whatnot in the episode. But in a video I made about that episode, I talked about how RG3 reminds me a lot of RG111, which is Rontgenium, and the atomic number is 111, so it's RG111. Rontgen rays are actually just the same thing as X-rays, and I talked about, you know, raising the cross. The X is the cross. X is even like the St. Andrew's cross and whatnot, but raising the cross. X-rays let you see inside of yourself. The kingdom of heaven is within you. I even talked about the X theme all around the Super Bowl. Like I said earlier, the X theme, I'm pretty sure, is just connected to King Charles III, as His name in gematria also equals X in Jewish gematria. His name and the letter X equal the same thing. Robert Griffin III in gematria even equals 111. Anyway, in that episode 2, this guy's the Washington Redskins owner, and he's all mad about Cartman and whatnot stealing the name, or they didn't steal it, but they picked up the name Washington Redskins, and then they were abusing it and making it, defaming the football team, basically. So he talks to the Goodell bot that's all broke, and then he ends up talking to all these owners. But the thing is, one of the owners is missing. It's from the Buffalo Bills, and that's because Ralph Wilson, the Buffalo Bills owner, had just died at the age of 95 earlier in the year. So the Buffalo Bills didn't have a manager or an owner at the time. So, moral of the story, just interesting. They'd make an episode about, the Redskins, and then the owner of the Buffalo Bills, who's also connected to Native Americans, isn't there. Perfect timing, I guess. But then I just said the death of Kyle Calloway, and he was a former Buffalo Bill. O.J. Simpson connected to the Buffalo Bills as well. But the third president to be assassinated, William McKinley, just so happened to get assassinated at the World's Fair that was held in Buffalo, New York. And like I said before, I feel like it's super connected to an upcoming political assassination. I think it has something to do with the Republican National Convention that's in Cleveland, but who knows? I've just been throwing this out here a whole lot. Really seems like they've been just super foreshadowing Cleveland, even in regards to the Omaha Indians that I feel like they were showing me, or whatever it was showing me. They were originally from the Cleveland area and whatnot. But even look at it up here. So he got shot on September 6th, and then he died on September 14th, and he died of gangrene because they couldn't get a bullet out of him. But it says the newly developed X-ray machine was displayed at the fair, but the doctors were reluctant to use it on McKinley to search for the bullet because they didn't know what the side effects had on him. Just interesting in regards to RG3 and the X-ray stuff. X-ray and gematria has identical gematria to the town I live in that killed Yellow Smoke. Also, I find it interesting, so we got Grover Cleveland, the guy he served 2 non-consecutive terms as president. I talked about Benjamin Harrison being in between. The only 2 presidents that were Harrison was William Henry Harrison, the first president to die in office, and Benjamin Harrison. But it was the 9th and the 23rd president, which connects to Pope Francis's visit yet again. Actually, I believe William Henry Harrison even died at the age of 68. In gematria, Barack Obama equals 68, Donald John Trump equals 68, Pope Francis equals 68, Prince Charles equals 68. I mean, what are the odds of all that, That's probably maybe something to do with the town I live in, and that's why I'm seeing the number or whatever. Who knows? Anyway, moral of the story. So Benjamin Harrison serves in between Grover Cleveland, and William McKinley serves after Grover Cleveland. These guys both die in the year 1901. Benjamin Harrison dies in 1901. William McKinley dies in 1901. In numerology, you even take out the 0, it would be like a lot like 191. The Society of Jesus equals 191. That's the Jesuits. A ton of other stuff, whole other topic, but just wanted to bring it up. Maybe I'll leave a little note. Anyway, if you go from Benjamin Harrison's death to William McKinley's death, it's a span of 185 days. Just the number I've been seeing a lot lately, too. Donald John Trump equals 185. Missing airplanes, 185. Stock market crash, 185. Once again, the stock market crash happened when Herbert Hoover, the only president from Iowa, was in office. World Trade Center equals 185. The Book of Mormon equals 185. Book of Revelation, 185. I even put in the power of love, just because there's lots of Back to the Future coding. Former Miss America, also 185. Queen Elizabeth is pretty much just Miss America, and if she dies, she'll be former Miss America. She surpassed Queen Victoria for longest reigning monarch. Queen Victoria also died in 1901. She died on January 22nd, 122. Pope Francis equals 122. Golden State, San Francisco, Kansas City, they all equal 122. Much more, The guy who killed McKinley has identical gematria to Cleveland Browns even. Also, with the Cleveland Cavaliers winning, Buffalo is now number 3 in cities with the longest sports drought, behind Ottawa and San Diego. I find this interesting for a whole bunch of different reasons. So, the last time that Buffalo won a sports championship was in 1965, and they beat the San Diego Chargers. The Los Angeles Clippers used to be the Buffalo Braves, and then they moved to San Diego and became the San Diego Clippers, I believe, and then they moved to Los Angeles. And then it says Ottawa since 1927, Stanley Cup. The CFL's Rough Riders won 9 Grey Cups, last in 1976. Interesting because the president after William McKinley was Theodore Roosevelt, the Rough Rider. Anyway, I typed in Native Americans in gematria, because who knows, just typed it in, see what it was. Native Americans equals 154. So, that instantly connects it to the royal theme. And maybe that's why I keep seeing all this coding to the Native American stuff. But Prince Charles' wife is Princess Camilla, who equals 154. The Fresh Prince equals 154, from West Philadelphia. That's why, Prince Charles would be the Fresh Prince or whatever. Or actually the Fresh King. And then Prince William would be the Fresh Prince and all kinds of stuff, But interesting, that's 154. There's even a town or a neighborhood in West Philadelphia that's called Dunlap, like the town that I live in. So maybe that's why it seems important. Maybe that's why they're showing me my town, because it's connected to this. Plutonium-239 equals 154. That's what they use to make the nuclear bomb and whatnot. Plutonium, also the gas for time travel in Back to the Future. Nuclear Reactor 154, Rio Olympics 154. August 31st will be the 19th anniversary of Princess Diana's death, 19 years, 154. Restoration equals 154, that's when King Charles II regained the crown after Oliver Cromwell had died. Even the tweet from Marvin McNutt on Kyle Calloway's CNN article, it said it came at 154. The NBA Finals began on the 154th day of the season, or of the year. It was 6-2, which also just so happened to be Queen Elizabeth's 63rd anniversary of her coronation of being queen. Denver Broncos, who won the Super Bowl, and Levi's Stadium, they finished 15-4. The singer Prince was supposedly up for 154 hours before he died. George equals 154. It could be Prince George, like Prince William's son, but also if Prince Charles becomes the king, he might not become King Charles III. He'd become King George VII. And King George VII equals 138 in gematria, just like Donald Trump, just like all the 138s and 183s I showed, at the Miss Gay Missouri stuff. But also, in regards to this gematria, so Charles was born on 11/14. That South Park episode, Go Fund Yourself, came out on 9/24 of 14. So just interesting, the gematria of Native Americans, 154, 11/14, a lot like the date that Charles was born, and then 9/24, the day the South Park episode came out. But going to end this one right here. Like I said, I'm going to make these into a playlist. That way they're not so long. I know this one's really long, but I got a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about in regards to it that it's just going to take too long. I want to divide it up. So have a good one.